Have you ever wondered what would happen if a billionaire walked into a bank during a crisis? That's exactly what occurred when Elon Musk stumbled upon a shocking scene at a local financial institution. An elderly man, confused and distressed, had just been forcibly removed from the premises. But as the tech mogul approached, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The bank staff's faces drained of color as they realized who was about to intervene. Elon Musk's day began like any other, a whirlwind of meetings and decisions that would shape the future of his companies. His mind raced with thoughts of rocket launches, electric car innovations, and the next big leap for humanity. But as the afternoon sun climbed higher, an unexpected urge struck him. He needed to visit a local bank. It wasn't often that Musk found himself standing in line like an ordinary citizen. The bustling bank lobby felt worlds away from the high-tech boardrooms he usually inhabited. Tellers called out numbers, and the air hummed with the low murmur of conversations and the rustle of papers. As Musk waited his turn, something caught his attention. A commotion near the front desk grew louder, voices rising with tension. He craned his neck, curiosity getting the better of him. What he saw next left him stunned. An elderly man, his face creased with worry, stood trembling before a stern-faced bank employee. The old man's clothes were worn but neat, his white hair carefully combed. He clutched a piece of paper in his gnarled hands, waving it desperately as he tried to explain something. The bank employee's patience was clearly wearing thin. Her voice carried across the lobby, sharp and dismissive. "Sir, I've told you 3 times now. We can't help you without proper identification. You need to leave." Musk watched in disbelief as 2 security guards approached the old man. Gently but firmly, they took hold of his arms, guiding him towards the exit. The elderly man's protests grew weaker, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Something inside Musk snapped. This wasn't right. The man clearly needed help, not to be tossed out onto the street. Without thinking, Musk stepped out of line, his presence immediately drawing attention. As he strode towards the front desk, the atmosphere in the bank shifted. Hushed whispers rippled through the crowd. "Is that, Elon Musk?" The tellers froze, their eyes widening in recognition. The security guards paused, the elderly man still between them. Musk's face was set with determination. He'd come to the bank for a simple errand, but fate had other plans. Now, he found himself about to step into a situation he couldn't have imagined when he woke up that morning. The air in the bank grew thick with tension as Musk approached the elderly man and the startled staff. Everyone held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Time seemed to slow as Musk approached, giving him a chance to truly see the old man at the heart of this drama. Beneath the nervous energy and confusion, there was a dignity in the way he held himself. It was a stark contrast to the impatience radiating from the bank staff. What story lay hidden behind those weathered eyes, and why did it seem no one was willing to listen? The elderly man's appearance told a tale of its own. His clothes, though worn, were neatly pressed, a sign of someone who took pride in their appearance despite limited means. Silver hair, carefully combed, framed a face etched with lines of both laughter and worry. But it was his hands that drew the eye. Gnarled with age, they trembled violently as they clutched a crumpled piece of paper like it. Was his last hope in the world. As Musk drew closer, he could hear the man's voice, quavering with a mix of frustration and desperation. "Please," he pleaded. "I know I had an account here. My wife and I opened it together years ago." The teller's response was clipped, her patience clearly wearing thin. "Sir, without proper ID or account information, there's nothing we can do. We've been over this 3 times now." The misunderstanding became clearer with each passing moment. The elderly man was struggling to remember key details, his mind clouded by age and stress. He'd come to the bank hoping to access funds he was certain existed, but without the right documentation, he'd hit a wall of bureaucracy. "My Maggie," the old man's voice cracked with emotion. "She always handled the paperwork, but now she's gone, and I can't remember the account number." He held out the crumpled paper, a faded bank statement from years past. "This is all I could find. Please, can't you look it up by our names?" The teller's face softened for a moment, a flicker of sympathy crossing her features. But it vanished quickly, replaced by a mask of professional detachment. "I'm sorry, sir, but that's not enough. Bank policy is very clear. Without proper identification or current account details, we can't access any information or funds." As the security guards gently but firmly took hold of the man's arms, the full weight of his situation seemed to crash down upon him. His shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. The paper slipped from his fingers, floating to the ground like a fallen leaf. In that moment, he looked impossibly small and fragile, a man adrift in a world that had moved on without him. Musk's face darkened as he watched the scene unfold. The harsh treatment, born perhaps more of rigid policy than genuine cruelty, was painfully apparent. And in the old man's eyes, he saw a deep well of shame and helplessness. It was a look that said he'd faced this kind of dismissal before, that the world had grown cold and unforgiving in ways he struggled to navigate. The air in the bank shifted, charged with a new tension. It wasn't just the old man's plight causing a stir anymore. Something else was happening, something that made the staff's confident masks begin to crack. A young teller, Sarah, felt her cheeks grow hot as recognition dawned. Her eyes darted from the elderly man to the imposing figure of Elon Musk, now striding purposefully across the lobby. She tugged nervously at her collar, suddenly very aware of how their treatment of the old man must have looked. Next to Sarah, the branch manager, Mr. Thompson, straightened his tie and cleared his throat. "We were just following protocol," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. But even as the words left his mouth, doubt crept into his eyes. The security guards who had been escorting the elderly man out now stood frozen, unsure whether to continue or retreat. One of them, Dave, a burly man with a usually stoic expression, found himself avoiding eye contact with anyone in the room. As Musk drew closer, the staff's initial justifications began to sound hollow, even to their own ears. They had been trained to follow strict guidelines, to protect the bank's interests and maintain order. But faced with the palpable distress of the old man and the piercing gaze of a global celebrity, those rules suddenly felt cold and impersonal. Sarah's mind raced, recalling the pressure to process customers quickly, to never bend the rules. Mr. Thompson remembered countless meetings where efficiency and security were emphasized above all else. Dave thought of the times he'd been praised for his firm handling of difficult situations. But now, with Musk as an unexpected witness, their actions felt less like proper procedure and more like callous disregard. The staff's unease grew with each step Musk took. Sarah fumbled with papers on her desk, trying to look busy. Mr. Thompson straightened his already immaculate suit jacket, a nervous tic he thought he'd long outgrown. Dave shifted his weight from one foot to the other, wishing he could disappear into the background. As Musk approached, his presence seemed to fill the entire bank. Conversations hushed, and all eyes turned to watch the unfolding scene. The staff made clumsy attempts to regain their composure, to present a united front. But their usual air of authority had evaporated, replaced by a palpable sense of apprehension. Mr. Thompson stepped forward, plastering on a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He opened his mouth to greet Musk, to perhaps offer an explanation. But before he could utter a word, Musk's steady gaze silenced him. It was clear that pleasantries and excuses would not suffice. The tech mogul's attention was fixed squarely on the elderly man, and the air crackled with the promise of confrontation. As Musk stepped forward, his voice cut through the tension like a thunderclap. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his eyes fixed on the trembling elderly man. The bank staff froze, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. Sarah, the young teller, felt her knees go weak as she realized who was addressing them. Musk's body language radiated authority. He stood tall, shoulders back, his gaze sweeping across the staff before settling on Mr. Thompson. The branch manager swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing visibly. "Mr. Musk," he stammered, "we were just following bank policy." "Policy?" Musk interrupted, his voice low but intense. "Is it your policy to treat customers like this?" He gestured towards the elderly man, who seemed to shrink under the attention. The tech mogul's tone was controlled, but there was an undercurrent of anger that made everyone in earshot tense up. As Musk pressed for answers, other customers in the bank began to take notice. Phones came out, and hushed whispers spread through the lobby. "Is that really Elon Musk? What's he doing here?" The atmosphere crackled with anticipation. Musk's questions came rapid fire, leaving no room for evasion. How long has this gentleman been trying to access his account? What efforts have you made to assist him? Have you considered that he might be struggling with memory issues? With each query, the staff's composure crumbled further. Suddenly, Musk's voice softened as he turned to the elderly man. "Sir, may I ask your name?" The old man looked up, surprise and gratitude mingling in his watery eyes. "George," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "George Williams." Musk nodded, then spun back to face the staff. His next words were filled with passion and conviction. "Mr. Williams here isn't just a policy to be enforced. He's a human being who needs our help and respect. He's someone's father, someone's grandfather. How would you want your own parents or grandparents to be treated in this situation?" The staff's faces fell as the weight of Musk's words sank in. Sarah felt tears pricking at her eyes, while Mr. Thompson's shoulders slumped in shame. Even Dave, the security guard, looked visibly shaken. As Musk's impromptu speech came to an end, a hush fell over the bank. The tech billionaire's presence seemed to fill the space, leaving everyone in awe of what they'd just witnessed. With a gentleness that contrasted sharply with his earlier intensity, Musk turned back to George Williams. The elderly man looked up at him, a glimmer of hope replacing the despair in his eyes. The silence in the bank was deafening as Musk knelt beside George Williams. What happened next left everyone in the room struggling to hold back tears. As the elderly man began to speak, his trembling voice revealed a story so heart-wrenching It would change the lives of everyone present forever. George's weathered hands twisted nervously in his lap as he looked up at Musk. I never thought I'd be telling my story to someone like you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Musk nodded encouragingly, his eyes filled with genuine concern. The old man's tale unfolded like a patchwork quilt of joy and sorrow. George and his beloved wife Maggie had been married for 52 years. They'd scraped and saved, working multiple jobs to put their children through college. Life hadn't been easy, but they'd always had each other. Then, 6 months ago, Maggie fell ill. The medical bills piled up faster than autumn leaves. "We thought we had enough saved," George said, his voice cracking. But it wasn't enough. It's never enough when you're fighting for someone's life. After Maggie passed, George found himself adrift in a sea of grief and confusion. His children, busy with their own lives in distant cities, called when they could. But it wasn't the same as having Maggie by his side, handling the finances and remembering all the important details. "I knew we had money in this bank," George continued, gesturing weakly at his surroundings. "Maggie always said it was our rainy day fund. Well, it's pouring now." He paused, wiping away a tear. "But I couldn't remember the account number. And my ID, I lost it somewhere in all the chaos of the hospital visits." The full extent of the misunderstanding began to dawn on everyone listening. This wasn't just about a forgotten account number or a misplaced ID. It was about a man drowning in a system not designed for those struggling with grief and memory loss. Musk's face was a canvas of emotions as he listened. Shock gave way to deep empathy, then to a fierce determination. He placed a gentle hand on George's shoulder. "Mr. Williams," he said softly, "I promise you, we're going to fix this." As George's story came to an end, all eyes in the bank turned to the staff. The atmosphere was charged with a mixture of shame, regret, and anticipation. How would they respond to this elderly man's plight, now that the full story had come to light? Rules exist for a reason, but what happens when following them leads to a moral crisis? As the bank staff faced the consequences of their actions, a battle between policy and conscience was about to unfold. The outcome would challenge everything they thought they knew about their jobs. Sarah, the young teller who had first noticed Musk, stepped forward. Her hands shook as she cleared her throat. I'm so sorry, Mr. Williams," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We should have done more to help you." The internal conflict was visible on every staff member's face. Mr. Thompson, the branch manager, looked torn between his years of training and the harsh reality of George's situation. Dave, the security guard, shifted uncomfortably, his usual stoic expression replaced by one of genuine concern. As the staff grappled with their choices, the pressure that had influenced their actions became clear. They had been taught to follow protocol without question, to protect the bank's interests at all costs. But now, faced with the human cost of those rigid policies, doubt crept in. "We were so focused on following the rules," Mr. Thompson admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "We forgot to see the person behind the problem." The weight of their mistake hung in the air, thick and oppressive. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she remembered dismissing George's pleas earlier that day. "I kept thinking about my performance metrics, about how long the line was getting," she confessed. "I never stopped to really listen to what Mr. Williams was saying." The tension in the room built as the staff wrestled with the consequences of their choices. They had prided themselves on their professionalism, on running a tight ship. But at what cost? The realization that they had caused real pain to a vulnerable member of their community hit hard. Finally, Mr. Thompson stepped forward. He looked George in the eye, his own gaze filled with remorse. "Mr. Williams, on behalf of the entire staff, I want to offer you our deepest apologies. We failed you today, and that's unacceptable." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. One by one, other staff members echoed the sentiment, each offering their own words of regret and promises to do better. As the apologies flowed, the atmosphere in the bank shifted. The first tentative steps towards making amends were being taken. Sarah offered to personally help George sort through his paperwork. Dave promised to ensure George always had a comfortable place to sit and wait if he needed to return to the bank. Elon Musk nodded approvingly at these gestures, but his expression remained serious. It was clear that while this was a good start, the situation was far from resolved. The underlying issues that had led to this crisis still needed to be addressed. As the staff continued their efforts to make things right with George, Musk's mind was already racing with ideas for more sweeping changes. Elon Musk's eyes swept across the bank, taking in the tense faces of staff and customers alike. His mind was clearly churning, formulating a plan that would go far beyond this single incident. Without warning, he stepped onto a nearby chair, commanding the attention of everyone in the room. "Listen up, folks," Musk's voice rang out, clear and decisive. "What we've witnessed today isn't just about one man or one bank. It's a symptom of a much larger problem in our society." The crowd hung on his every word, phones raised to capture this unexpected moment. Musk didn't hold back. He challenged the bank's policies, questioning how institutions designed to serve the public could become so disconnected from the very people they were meant to help. "When did we decide that efficiency was more important than humanity?" he asked, his gaze sweeping across the now uncomfortable staff. But Musk wasn't just there to criticize. His impromptu speech touched on deeper issues: the respect and dignity owed to our elders, the responsibility of corporations to the communities they serve. "We're quick to celebrate innovation," he said, "but we've forgotten the wisdom and experience our older generations bring to the table." As Musk spoke, the atmosphere in the bank shifted. Staff members exchanged glances, a mix of shame and dawning realization on their faces. Customers nodded in agreement, some wiping away tears as Musk's words struck home. Then Musk's tone changed. There was a glint in his eye that those familiar with the tech mogul recognized, the spark of an idea taking shape. "This isn't just about making things right for Mr. Williams," he said, gesturing to the elderly man, who now sat in a comfortable chair, looking on in amazement. "It's about changing the system." The crowd leaned in as Musk hinted at a larger solution. "What if," he proposed, "we could create a banking system that truly serves all generations, one that combines cutting-edge technology with good old-fashioned human compassion?" You could hear a pin drop as Musk made his announcement. "I'm going to work with this bank, and any others willing to step up, to develop elderly-friendly policies and technologies. We're going to set a new standard for how financial institutions treat their most vulnerable customers." The reaction was immediate. A ripple of excitement ran through the crowd, followed by a burst of applause. The bank staff looked at each other. Hope and apprehension mingling on their faces. This was uncharted territory, but the potential for positive change was undeniable. As the crowd's murmurs grew, discussing the possibilities Musk had laid out, the man himself stepped down from his impromptu podium. With purpose in his stride, he turned his attention back to George Williams. The elderly man's story had sparked this moment, and now Musk was ready to take the next step in making things right. While the crowd buzzed with excitement over Musk's grand plans, the tech mogul's attention shifted entirely. He knelt beside George Williams's chair, his voice dropping to a gentle murmur. The contrast was striking. Moments ago, Musk had commanded the room. Now his focus narrowed to this one man who'd sparked it all. George looked up, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and lingering fear. He'd been through so much, and the whirlwind of the past hour left him reeling. Musk sensed this, placing a reassuring hand on the older man's arm. "Mr. Williams," Musk began, his tone warm and free of its earlier fire, "I want you to know that you're not alone in this." The billionaire's eyes crinkled with genuine concern. "Can you tell me a bit more about your situation? What do you need most right now?" George's hands trembled as he spoke. He told Musk about the stack of medical bills at home, the fear of losing his house, the loneliness that seemed to grow with each passing day. Musk listened intently, nodding at times, his brow furrowing at others. As George's story unfolded, an unexpected connection formed between the two men. Despite their vastly different lives, there was a shared understanding of loss, of the weight of responsibility, of facing an uncertain future. Musk leaned in closer. "Mr. Williams, I want to help, not just with the bank situation, but with everything." He outlined a plan: financial advisors to sort through the medical bills, legal help to ensure George's home was secure, even a team to help with daily needs. George's eyes welled up with tears. I don't know what to say," he whispered. "Why would you do all this for me?" Musk's reply was simple but powerful. "Because it's the right thing to do, and because your story reminds us all of what really matters." The elderly man's shoulders shook as he let out a sob, not of despair this time, but of relief and renewed hope. Musk squeezed his hand, a silent promise passing between them. As Musk stood, the atmosphere in the bank had shifted dramatically. The earlier tension had melted away, replaced by a sense of possibility. Staff members wiped away tears, customers whispered among themselves, and even the usually stoic security guards looked moved. Musk's voice carried across the room as he made one final declaration. "Mr. Williams will receive the care and respect he deserves. And this is just the beginning. We're going to make sure that no one else faces what he did today." With those words, it was clear that this chance encounter had set something much bigger in motion. As Musk turned to address the wider group once more, the spark of change was visible in every face that looked back at him. The spark of change Elon Musk ignited was about to become a wildfire. A shaky smartphone video, a tearful witness, and a story too powerful to contain. The events of this day were far from over. What started in this bank was about to sweep across the nation, challenging long-held assumptions about how we treat our elders. As Musk finished speaking with George, a young woman stepped forward from the crowd. Her hands trembled as she held up her phone, tears glistening in her eyes. I recorded everything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I hope that's okay. I just felt like people needed to see this. Within minutes, the video was uploaded and began its journey across the internet. It spread like wildfire through social media platforms, racking up thousands of views, shares, and comments with each passing hour. The story of George Williams and Elon Musk's unexpected intervention struck a chord with people from all walks of life. As the video gained traction, news outlets picked up the story. Local stations ran segments featuring interviews with bank customers who had witnessed the event. National networks sent reporters to the scene, hoping to catch a glimpse of Musk or hear more about George's situation. The public reaction was intense and varied. Many praised Musk for his compassion and willingness to step in. Others used the incident as a rallying cry, sharing stories of their own elderly relatives struggling with similar issues. Some criticized the bank, calling for boycotts and demanding policy changes. But there were also voices urging caution, reminding everyone that the full story was still unfolding. Financial experts weighed in on the complexities of bank policies and the challenges of balancing security with customer service. As the story gained national attention, something unexpected began to happen. Other banks and companies started examining their own policies regarding elderly customers. Some announced immediate changes, while others promised thorough reviews of their practices. The conversation expanded beyond just banking. People began discussing the broader issues of elder care and respect in society. Social media buzzed with hashtags like "I'll respect our elders" and "age-friendly business." Community organizations reported an uptick in volunteers wanting to work with senior citizens. Back at the bank where it all started, the staff arrived the next morning to find a crowd of reporters and curious onlookers. As they made their way inside, each employee felt the weight of the previous day's events. They knew that their actions and decisions would be under intense scrutiny moving forward. Sarah, the young teller who had first noticed Musk, paused before entering the building. She took a deep breath, remembering George's face and Musk's words. With a newfound determination, she stepped inside, ready to face whatever challenges this new day might bring. As the dust settled on this remarkable day, the true power of compassion shone through. What began as a simple act of kindness from Elon Musk had sparked a nationwide conversation about how we treat our elders. The story of George Williams touched hearts and opened eyes, reminding us all that behind every policy and procedure are real people with real struggles. But the work was far from over. The incident at the bank was just the beginning. It highlighted the ongoing need for awareness and action in protecting our most vulnerable citizens. From financial institutions to healthcare providers, every sector of society was now under scrutiny. As viewers, we all have a role to play. The next time you're out in the world, take a moment to look around. Is there someone who needs help? A kind word? A moment of patience? Sometimes the smallest gestures can make the biggest difference. By staying vigilant and choosing kindness in our daily interactions, we can all contribute to building a more compassionate society. After all, isn't that the kind of world we all want to live in?